But something miraculous happens over the long term, and Derek's memory kind of settles down, and out pops this accurate version. At the conference, there were two sorts of talented autistic people discussed. One were the artistic group, who like visual patterns, and the other group were the musicians, who like musical patterns. Ultimately, pattern is pattern. Some may prefer the visual modality and some may prefer the sound modality, but the essence of pattern is the same. It's about repetition, it's about regularity, it's about small increments of predictable change. So say if you look at the drawings of an autistic artist like Stephen Wiltshire, which is lots of minute details, all very organised, and you look at the way Derek plays the piano with his improvising, which is lots of minute detail and scrupulously organised, it's very similar. And interestingly, that people are now discovering that autistic artistic savants like Stephen Wiltshire have perfect pitch as well. So actually their abilities cross the modalities. So Stephen's he's not a great pianist, but he's got a very good musical ear, which people have only quite recently discovered, I think. So clearly that fascination with raw perceptual detail and pattern can apply to other modalities. Of course, Derek, you can't see, can you? So it's not going to apply to you, but certainly people with vision who are good autistic artists often have an interest in sound as well.
This pattern making lies behind another approach to savantism. Patterns mean predictability, and people with autism like the world to be predictable. They're comfortable following rules. This might help explain some special skills like calendrical calculation, which depend on following rules meticulously. Pattern making is the idea that Simon Baron-Cohen's working on. He's director of the Autism Research Centre at Cambridge University, and he talks about systemising.
Well, this is a new word, but I think people get hold of it very easily. Basically, we define systemising as the drive to analyse a system, could be any kind of system, or to build a system. And when I say system, it might be a mechanical system like a car engine. It could be an abstract system like mathematics or music. It could be a natural system like the weather or a plant. Or it could be what we call a collectible system, like a collection of CDs, which you might put into a particular alphabetical order or by genre. The thing about systems is that they follow rules, and when you systemize, what you're trying to do is identify the rules that govern the system, so you can predict how it works.
And this is something that autistic people particularly like to do?
Yes, we've used, first of all, questionnaires with adults with autism or Asperger's syndrome, just asking them how interested they are in different kinds of systems. And it turns out they score very high on these questionnaires. It's called the systemizing quotient. They score higher than other people in the population. It's as if they're naturally attracted to very predictable systems or to try and understand the system.
People with autism find it very difficult to operate socially. I suppose social interaction is very difficult to systemize in that way, isn't it?
That's exactly right. So the thing about people is that they are unpredictable. We very rarely say the same thing again and again or interact in the identical way each time. Each time we interact with somebody, we might be introducing something new, saying something new. So predicting, repeating patterns is very hard in the social realm. In the mechanical realm, it should be the case that each time you turn on your computer, you get the same pattern of events, or each time you turn on your car engine, you should get the same pattern of events. It may well be that people with autism have difficulties with the social, precisely because it's so unpredictable.
And you're listening to The Science Show, which today is about talent and autism. There's another thing about the way autistic people behave that may help to explain extraordinary talent. They can concentrate for a long time on their chosen activity. Some have suggested that it's this very amount of time that hones their expertise. But Francesca Happ of the Institute of Psychiatry in London says this is not the whole story. Oh, and the EastEnders she refers to is the extremely popular soap on British TV.
Of course, people with autism who have a talent spend a long time in that talent area, learning about it and practicing it. That's also true of ordinary people who are very interested in something. And you might say that the neurotypical people sitting on the bus discussing EastEnders every day are practicing the skill of narrative, of sharing relevant information, of communicating quickly and easily complex social concepts. I'm not sure that it's the sheer time that's spent that differentiates the person with autism with a talent from the rest of us. I think it's the talent domain that they choose, and I think it's the way their brain processes the information. It is true that people with autism are able to pay attention for long periods of time to stimuli and information that we would consider repetitive and boring. And my analogy would be, you might see a child with autism watching drops of water drop from their fingers, and they might be happy to do this for hours, watching the individual drops of water. And this would seem to us a very repetitive act, and we would think what the child could possibly get from it. My analogy would be with a very highly trained, highly skilled musician, neurotypical or autistic, who will choose to listen to the same piece of music over and over again, recorded on different occasions with different conductors and different orchestras, which to a non-musician would sound exactly the same and be an incredibly boring endeavour. But to an expert, each is absolutely different and absolutely original, and maybe the drops of water are just like that for the child with autism.
Thinking in details, thinking in patterns, concentration on certain sorts of information. All this may help explain how some autistic people have extraordinary talents. And there's something else, too. Temple Grandin not only thinks in details, she thinks in pictures. Give her a key word and she'll tell you what pops up in her mind.
Pig.
Well, I saw pigs that I used in my PhD experiment. I saw some piggy banks that were in a bank ad. Now I've gotten off the subject, and I'm now on the subject of banks and the financial collapse. Okay, now you're seeing how it's associative thinking. I first came up with the pigs out on the a pig farm from a PhD research. Then I saw a piggy bank, but I've been very preoccupied with the financial stuff. So then I very quickly now I'm seeing the paper and the TV and all the bad news that's on there, you know, of banks going broke.
So you don't think in words, and yet you are very good at using words, both in speech and in writing.
Well, that came slowly. I was not fully fluent in speech until I was 4 years old. Used to be a lot more stressed in my talking, but my thinking is in photorealistic pictures. Even when I think about something abstract like the Wall Street collapse, that is in pictures. Because being a visual thinker, I see the hard assets, like shopping centers without the shops being rented, broken windows. I see the shoe shine lady looking up at me just about crying, telling me about her house was foreclosed and her kids had to live in an apartment. I see a big auction yard full of construction equipment that's all being sold off because the contractors have gone broke. I see those kind of things. You know, even something that would be abstract like the financial crisis, I see in pictures. Well, I only understand hard assets.
Temple says that her mind is like Google Images. Her way of making categories is to store specific images in more general file folders. This ability to think in pictures has also made her work with cattle so successful.
Well, being a visual thinker, it just seemed to make sense to me. The cattle would stop in different places in the race to get down the race and see what cattle were seeing. You know, I think visually, I assumed that cattle thought visually. In fact, when I first started doing this back in the 70s, I thought everybody thought in pictures. I didn't know that other people don't think in pictures. I was shocked to find out they didn't. And I started interviewing people. And I developed some questions on interviewing people on how they thought. Now, I'm not going to pick something like house, dog, or car, because most people can visualize their own dog. But let's pick something you're a little less familiar with, church steeples. And I found that when I asked that to people, they kind of most of them got a vague, generalized picture. I don't get a vague, generalized picture. I'm seeing specific ones. And they're coming up sequentially, a series of slides of actual churches, most of them around in Fort Collins, where I live. The church I went to as a child, and we got a weird one over in LaPorte with a white concrete steeple, very ugly. But they're specific ones. See, my concept of what a steeple is I take all the pictures of steeples that I can pull up and I put them in the church steeple file folder. I don't put them in the mobile phone tower cell file folder or the radio tower cell folder, file folder.